Good morning, everybody, and nice to have you all back. And welcome back to this week's podcast with the Pilot Group. We have entitled this podcast, Not Just Hot Air. So I'm hoping we're going to get some hot air and some excitement in this podcast. This morning I have Lee Morgan, who's the MD of Pilot Group.
Still.
Which is really good. And we have Simon with us from the Green Shield Group. Good morning.
Good morning.
You guys are going to do a far better job at introducing yourself and what you do. Lee, just give us a quick couple of seconds, and Simon will allow you to be a little bit more embellished in relation to what you do. And let's see, we're very interested to sort of go into more of a deep dive about you and your business today.
Yeah, so I'm the managing director of our EMS business at Pilot Group. Been with the company for 12 months now. Seen real growth in that 12 months. It's been really exciting. You guys have been on the journey with us as well, and Simon's recently joined the journey with us as a partner. So yeah, really excited to be here again today and have Simon on. So yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, so my name's Simon. I'm one of the sustainability managers at Green Shield Group. Green Shield Group, in essence, install renewable energy systems such as solar PV, EV charging points, so on and so forth. But actually, what we're really about is helping public and private sector entities along their sustainability journey. And quite often that involves things that we can do directly, but quite often it's bringing in third-party businesses like the Pilot Group, who may offer a solution that we don't have within our own area of expertise, if you like. So yeah, we're just really passionate as a business about helping business along sustainability, reducing the carbon footprint, and so on and so forth. Really, from a 360-degree point of view, you know, it's not just focusing in on one thing. It really is trying to take care of the whole shebang, so to speak.
Yeah, fantastic. I think when we spoke earlier, I just sort of put a tag on you. I like doing this, but you strike me as being a sort of a playmaker. You understand, as you say, that full 360 journey.
Yeah.
So where typically do you start in that journey? Are you brought in any of those degrees? Are you brought in a top-level consultancy where they say, look, we just need to have a helicopter view of this, and then we're going to make decisions? What's the typical journey that you go on, Simon?
Quite often, particularly with what's happened over the last couple of years with energy prices, a business will be concerned about reducing energy costs. And a sort of quick win for them, if you like, is by installing something like a solar PV array. Because obviously if you're generating your own electricity on site, that's reducing what you're having to draw from the grid, therefore reducing your bills. So very often it's from that perspective, but also now if you sort of take a step back and look at the bigger picture, businesses are under pressure now to reduce the carbon footprint. You know, we deal with a lot of what you would call blue chip companies who are putting pressure on their supply chain to reduce the carbon footprint because they themselves are having to report on that, if you like, third party carbon footprint. So mainly we get involved because they're looking to either reduce their energy consumption from the grid, or they are under pressure as a business to reduce the carbon footprint from who they're supplying to, or they may want advice on things like ESG reporting, EV charging points, all these kind of things. But in the main, it's to do with an alternate source of energy other than the grid.
So I would imagine you're dealing with quite a few people within a business, within a sort of a decision-making unit, or people that you're talking to. Yeah. Explain to me the types of the job functions of who you're engaging with throughout that whole process. I mean, does it go all the way up to the C-suite? Is it more middle management? What's the type of people that you're engaging with in those businesses?
Yeah, it's definitely the C-suite. It could be that initially we go in at a lower level, depending on how we've made contact with this business, but ultimately it always ends up, you know, at the very highest level within the business or public sector organisation, whatever it is. If it's a small business, a small to medium enterprise, quite often it will be with the managing director and they will make all the decisions. It gets more complicated the bigger the organisation because they'll often be owned by a parent company, so you can agree things with the business itself at the sort of C-suite level, but then they'll have to refer to a parent company, and if they've got overseas owners then it has to go overseas as well. So it can be more drawn out depending on the size of the business, but it's always at that highest level that we're talking, because ultimately this is about a business's sustainability strategy, and those decisions are made at the highest level for all sorts of different reasons. It's how they want to be perceived by their customers and by the general public, which is really important for a business. It's about the financial aspects, so CFOs and that sort of level has to be involved. That's a really long-winded way of saying it. It is C-suite.
Yeah, so it's quite diverse.
It is.
So sort of a question to you both, really. What's the real light bulb moment that you get when you're talking to businesses? Because there is a lot of skepticism, and can you really make these savings for me? Is there that really solid ROI? And Lee, we've spoken about it in the past. It's almost too good to be true. So what's the real light bulb moment? Is it about that we're doing the right thing and we're working towards that sustainable future? Or is it really the thing that gets everybody's attention? You're not going to be surprised when I say this. Is it the cost reduction that everybody turns their head and goes, actually, yeah, look, we can actually save this amount of money? What's the real sort of game changer?
I think for us, C-suites, well, the decision is made. But if you've got champions in the business like Phil from Music Magpie on the previous episode, who's really driving change and really driving it on the agenda, it's great to have, because it's not just you pushing it, as sometimes it comes across as very salesy. Yes, we are a business, we're trying to sell for profit, of course, but also we're trying to help that business save money and energy in the same hand. But having that person in that business that can drive it is huge. So once you've got one or two of those in a business, you start to really put a lot of energy into it, and you can start to put a lot of time into it, because you know that it's on the agenda. It's like we were talking to Phil earlier, and Phil's biggest challenge with solar was, it was great in terms of return on investment, but then they've got roof issues, so it gets pushed back. So it's just having that someone there that's always going to keep that on the agenda and keep driving. Well, what else can we do to fund that? Can we get a system in like our system, or can we fund it through different routes to be able to fund the roof, but then also get the solar involved as well, because again, it's on the agenda. So having those people in the business makes a huge difference. And we're dealing with businesses, like Simon said, there are smaller businesses who haven't got a head of sustainability, haven't got anybody thinking about net zero. It isn't on the agenda. So then C-suite is a blocker. But the magic light bulb is when you've got people in the business who actually care about the environment, who want to make a difference, who want it on the agenda. And if you can get those people in the business championing what you're doing, then it's absolutely fantastic.
Simon, what about yourself? What do you see?
Yeah, I think the key for myself and for the businesses, when we're first speaking to these sort of business, particularly when you are talking at that higher level in terms of the C-suite job roles, is finding out why they're actually speaking to me in the first place, what it is that's made them either really interested or even just curious. Now, in the vast majority of occasions, it is financial. Let's not beat about the bush with this. It is financial, but you do get those businesses, as we've been speaking to Phil before, where they really care about sustainability and presenting their own business in the right way. But in the main, it's financial. So I guess from a light bulb moment kind of view, most businesses want to know that the technology works. That's the first thing. So it's being able to demonstrate to them just in very black and white terms, really. Well, if you're currently paying this, what we do, even if we use conservative estimations, it's going to mean a saving of you of this amount. And once they can see that, then the next thing really is showing them how they can do it, both from a financial affordability perspective, and also it might be an infrastructure issue they've got. You mentioned before about a roof might be an issue. Well, with technologies coming on board all the time, even that now we can get around. We recently started looking, for example, at solar carports as a way of being able to generate electricity rather than having to just put them on the roof. Because if you've got a relatively small roof, or if you're having to put them on the ground, which is additional cost and planning permission, then something like using your car park, which most businesses have, is another way of... So it's showing them that it's worth doing and they're able to do it. And there's also different financial instruments that can help them do it as well.
And do you find that those companies you go and talk to, do they have at hand all the information you need, or is there an element of what we call due diligence? We're going to do a podcast, aren't we, on site visits on the next episode, aren't we, Lee? But is there an element of you have to go in, you have to get under the skin of the business, you need to go and find the numbers to actually extrapolate that out and then present that back to them, or are they pretty hot on their numbers?
No, it's all, I can only speak for ourselves, but all our solutions, if you like, all our proposals to a business are data-driven. So the first stage is just really having an informal conversation with them, finding out what it is they're trying to achieve, because ultimately they might be trying to do something we just can't help them with, and it might be that we're referring them off to the likes of the Pilot Group or whoever it is. But the first stage is just that informal conversation to establish what they're wanting to achieve. Then, if there is a willingness then to move forward, then it's gathering the data that you're talking about, so that we can analyse it and then come up with a design and a proposal. And it's that stage there where we're reliant upon the business to have that to hand.
Yep.
Now, quite often, it's not to hand. I mean, you might be waiting a period of time for them to collate that sort of information. Rarely is it a case of you go and see them and it's, we've got this for you, and then within a couple of weeks it's all signed, and there is that period of due diligence from their part as well, because obviously they'll want to make sure that we as a business are who they're expecting us to be, and particularly with a bigger company, they're always going to do that. Yeah. So
there's a big drive, obviously, for the reduction of natural gas and natural gas consumption within the workplace. Yeah. I think I saw a stat this week, I was reading about it and sort of reading this for these podcasts, it's saying that by 2030 there's going to be a sort of a 25% reduction. That was in Germany, that actual report, but across Europe as well. So you've spoken about solar. Is that a viable alternative, or are we going to see people move more towards what we call biofuels or alternative fuels and gas energy, green energy as such? Is the challenge around solar just having the surface area to be able to capture enough energy? What's your view on that?
I think ultimately, if we look at it from the country's perspective, it's going to be a collection of all of those different things. It's going to be, more wind, more biogas, hydrogen when that eventually becomes viable, solar. Obviously, there's not going to be one answer, and it's going to depend on the business, or in the case of residential, on where that home is located. If you're in the very north of Scotland, solar might not be that attractive a proposition for you just because of where it's located. But wind might be. It's taking advantage of things like water turbines, which are becoming more prominent. There's all sorts of technologies which are being developed at the moment. And not one of them provides an answer on its own. It's going to be a whole bunch.
It's a cocktail, isn't it, almost?
It is.
So with solar, my understanding is that maybe in an industrial area, you're going to need more heaters within that environment. How does that, is that true? Are you going to be deploying more units to heat an area, or are those heaters becoming more and more efficient, those electric heaters that you're putting into those environments?
Well, I think that's one for you.
Yeah, the electric heaters that are out there, you can get to the same kilowatt usage and the same heat output,
but
as
you
can
need more
do
of
with the
them.
gas. You would need significantly more of them.
Right.
But it depends on the application. If you're using infrared, and it depends on what you're manufacturing, it depends on the application of the building, what you're doing, it depends on the fabric of the building as well. So there's all different elements. So it's about going in and speccing that on floor area versus volume versus number of people versus, there might be some production heat that's factored into there as well, but it's still cost for a business. But yeah, I mean, going back to sort of your due diligence and the time and effort you put into a customer, when do you get to a point where you need to go, right, we're not getting anywhere now? At what point do you sort of, because it's been something that we've been talking about quite a lot, because we've got a pipeline that's significant and we're trying to drive that through into order book, but we've got to a position now where it's like, well, what does this customer actually need to get this over the line? What's the blockers that you have? Where do you get to a point where it's like, I've done as much as I can. And I know you put a lot of time and effort into your proposals, because I've seen some of them that have gone out there. They're very detailed. So
I think I suppose eventually we do give up. But to be honest with you, I think you've got to realise that businesses, their main thing is the day-to-day run of the business. And sometimes, as much as we want them to do what we want because we know it's good for them, it's just not the priority. And I think the danger is that occasionally you can take it personally that they're not moving at the speed you want them to. So for me personally, I will never give up on a business totally unless they tell me to go away. And I can give many anecdotes where I've gone back to them sort of 12 months later and said, look, I know we were speaking last year. It fell away for whatever reason. Is this something you're still interested in? If so, should we sort of reignite this conversation? And quite often they'll say, yeah, this year we had X, Y, and Z going on. It just was bad timing. So I personally wouldn't give up on them at all because it's not just the job. I genuinely am sort of like into the environment, sustainability. So for me, it is a bit of a crusade anyway.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't give up on them. I might sort of put them in the get in touch with them in 12 months file. But in terms of giving up, I actually wouldn't do that, to be honest with you, unless they are specifically said. Or they've gone elsewhere and,
Right, I get that. So I'm guessing you must be the font of all knowledge when it comes to grants, regulations, access that businesses have to be able to get funding. Is that something that's still quite prolific out there and people can access that funding to help them actually in the installation of some of these sort of initiatives? Or are we waiting for the general election to come out and it all be in the manifestos and then we kick on again? I don't know.
Well, in terms of grants, I definitely am not the font of all knowledge on grants, but we have access to people who do have that capability. So again, it goes back to what we're saying is I may not be able to help myself, but I know somebody who can.
Yep.
And that's certainly the situation with grants. And I know there was a big tranche of money released last September, I think it was, in terms of grant funding for sustainability projects. In terms of financial instruments, yes, we have got the capability where if a business hasn't got the capital to fund it themselves, then we can go down to other routes to help them. So certainly on that aspect, we can. And so I definitely wouldn't say we've got all the answers, but we generally know somebody who will have an answer because that's why we're there in the first place.
And Lee, do you get asked that question all the time when you go in to people after you've obviously had that initial sort of scoping call or conversation?
Definitely. Yeah, so obviously one of the biggest blockers for us is finance and CapEx blockers and procedures. So we do look at alternative routes, whether it's funding for ourselves, it's funding for external partners, but grants and initiatives that are out there for sustainable projects are definitely where we need to point people. And what I've learned recently is getting out to different chambers of commerce, getting into local authorities. That's where they've applied for some of the funding, whether it's match funding or partial funding. There's definitely grants out there. The process may be a little bit longer than what you'd like, but there's definitely funds out there, and I think I'm not sure when they will disappear and go back into other initiatives. I'm not sure, but it's definitely about getting in contact with your local authority, finding what's out there, what's available, and then trying to work with a local chamber that have the expertise within the business to help you apply for that funding. I've only recently sort of realised this because you just assume it'd be a government-wide thing and it'd be national, but it's not. It's whether that local authority have actually applied to draw from that grant that's been made available from the government. So because it's there doesn't mean that a local authority have actually applied for it and you can gain access to it. So it's about making sure that you've got the local knowledge where the business is, and then you're putting them in contact. I think there's another partner that we've not really mentioned, and I think we're going to try and get Gary on. So Gary works for Fusion for Business.
Yeah.
Gary's an ethical broker. So when we say ethical broker, we say it's someone that wants to get someone the best deal on the energy deals, but what he'll also do is then point them into contact with Simon or ourselves to then get them an even better deal in terms of reduce that even further. And Simon's got a lot of really good knowledge and got some really good insights into the funding part. So it'd be really good one day to get Gary on.
Yeah, let's get him on. So before we wrap up, we were talking to Phil, weren't we, from Music Magpie. I'd like to ask you the same question, Simon. So if anybody's listening to this podcast and hearing what we're doing here, what are the first steps? What are the initial steps? If people are looking at this from a blank piece of paper, what would be your advice to say to those people and just say, right, okay, you started from a blank piece of paper, this is what you need to do? What are the sort of 3 or 4 steps?
Well, The first thing I always say to a business, like I said, it's that initial conversation, that informal conversation, just asking them how they see the business moving forward, where the concerns lie. Are there concerns about, obviously we're in the field of sustainability, are there concerns financial, or is it just about complying with government regulations which are going to be coming in more and more over the years? Is it how they're perceived by the general public in terms of their attitude towards certain things? It's about speaking to them, and then once we understand that, then it's very easy to say to them, right, as a first step, as a low-hanging fruit option, let's have a look at this, because we can chip away at this, because it can't all be dealt with in one go, by one person, one organisation. It is going to take, it's a plan, it's showing them a plan. It generally is showing them a pathway, because I think, again, a lot of comments I get from MDs, CEOs, is that it all seems so daunting. Everything they have to do now from a sustainability perspective seems so daunting, as well as running the business. It's like, okay, well, let me show you a first step and then how that can progress, and perhaps even showing them a sort of timeline of a plan of what can be done and when it can be done.
I'm almost seeing a little bit of an online bit of content where you have like a tick box. Just say, right, if you're going on the first things to consider are this, and this. We might have to do a little bit of content around that. But I think to give people that sort of vision and direction is really important. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thanks for coming on today, Simon.
No
Good seeing you as well.
You
a nice,
too.
informative conversation. And it wasn't just hot air, was it? That was really good. So until the next time, we look forward to seeing you back on here. But for now, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today, and we look forward to having you join us again next time. But for now, it's time to close the shutter on another great episode of the Not Just Hot Air podcast.